Hi folks, my name is Roger Ebbage. I'm at Lane Community College in Eugene, Oregon. I manage the energy management and water conservation programs there. I've been doing that for 30 years. And I am pleased to welcome you to the Power of Persuasive Negotiation. This is a workshop that my friend Jerry Richmond has done for quite a while, and I would like to introduce her to you.
Great. Well, hi folks. We wish we could be with you personally, but this will have to substitute. I'm Jerry Richmond. I'm on the faculty at the University of Oregon. I'm in the chemistry department, kind of a combination of chemistry and physics. And I love doing science, but I also love being able to help faculty become more successful in their career endeavors. And that's what we do through the coach program that's been going for 20 years and providing some professional training for faculty as they proceed in their career and have their career challenges. So I'm going to jump right in now, and Roger and I are going to go back and forth with regards to sharing information with you. And it's really important that Roger is here because he really has a lot more experience in the community college area, and so that's why it's a real treat to have Roger with us today. So we're going to first start out by talking about the techniques in negotiation skills that are commonly taught in business schools, but not so much for us in technical schools, which is why the demand for this workshop is so high. And effective negotiation that we're going to talk about today is more than just asking for a higher salary. It's really about having a productive dialogue on a really tough subject, something that two of you disagree on, and trying to come up with a solution that you both share. Now, negotiation sometimes can be uncomfortable for people. So that's why Roger and I would just like you to think about how you feel about negotiation.
Yeah, is it a matter of being productive in the workplace? That's an important thing. Or is it for your career advancement? I have a couple of situations that I'll be talking about where both of these apply. So, but there are many more situations that we can address.
So if you're not comfortable, why not? Roger, what do you think? Why not?
Well, you could be a new faculty member or a new employee, but basically it's about ruining your relationship with a colleague or a boss who might be a little afraid to go in there and have a frank discussion about a situation that needs your boss's consideration if you're trying to change that. You won't walk away with anything. I mean, that's always a big fear. You might look like it's all about you. Are you a narcissist or a team player? I mean, that's an opinion that can come out of negotiation, I think. Or it's just too stressful. Nobody likes to go in there and talk to an employer or a boss or a manager and be stressed about it. I mean, it's better to avoid sometimes than not. So it could be too stressful, and then nothing's negotiable. I mean, we work in an environment where if you are a unionized shop, then you know, a lot of stuff is pretty much decided for you through the union negotiations. Or as I said earlier, you may be a brand new employee and you just don't want to rock the boat, and you get your classes down and start moving into your career. That applies as well.
Great, Roger. Okay, so we're going to go through the steps of a negotiation and go through each of these. And first, we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what is and isn't a negotiating situation, because sometimes it just isn't. But don't be afraid to try. So it is not an argument. We'll talk about how you can calm it down if it seems like an argument or a debate. It's not you win this time, I win this time, and we're just going to play this game together. And it's not solely competitive. You're trying to get to a situation where both of you are happy and not break the relationship, because it's usually with someone that you want to continue to be able to work with. So the ground rules are then that it's a professional exchange and it's not an emotional fight. Now, sometimes you may be negotiating with someone who is used to saying no. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you ask for something and the person just says no and stops talking. And in that case, it doesn't become a professional exchange. And if you're working with someone who doesn't go with the professional exchange, we'll talk about ways which you can get out of that no. because you don't want it to just stop there. And it worked for them, right? It worked for them, but it didn't work for you. So there is the expectation of give and take. And again, good people you negotiate with understand this. People that are less experienced may not. So talk about tricks to get it to be give and take. And the desire that you both win, and that you both win, not like this negotiation. This really isn't me. It may look like me, but you really want to have each of you have be a winner in the situation.
That's a great cartoon, Jerry.
It's amazing I could find this. Huh? Oh, okay, so it's also not a one-shot deal. It can take time. It can oftentimes be a 10-act play. It may mean going back and forth, and it may take time. Roger, you have an example of where it took time.
Yeah, over my career, I have done quite a few different things beyond just being a teacher or a program manager. I worked with an organization out of Seattle or in the late 90s to develop a professional development program for building operators. And I helped to develop it, and I was the owner. I purchased for the college a license to provide this professional development sequence in Oregon. We had a new administration come into the college, and after 14 years with the same president who fully supported our program, a new president came into the college and said, well, this really doesn't belong in a credit side program. It's more of a continuing ed program, and pulled that certification program from me and gave it to the continuing ed department. I fought for 2 years to get it back. And so I was successful with that, and now we're back operating the program. And so it didn't happen overnight. It was a constant back and forth with myself and the appropriate administrator to convince them that it needed to be back with me. And there were a variety of reasons for that. And we'll talk about those a little bit later.
So patience and persistence.
Absolutely, no question about it.
And probably more than a 10-act play over that amount of time. Okay, so the next thing is really to identify your negotiables. And so we want you to think about what might be negotiable for you, what you need to negotiate for now, and think about what these are. And the first thing is to assume that everything is negotiable. And don't be scared away by it because you don't think somebody else has negotiated for it before. In fact, what I've learned from many department heads, when some of my friends have become department heads, they have said to me, oh my God, I can't believe what everybody else is asking for. I never would have thought to ask for that. And they've gotten it. So, think that there may be other people that don't brag about the fact that they got something. And so it may not be so unusual. So I'm going to have Roger talk a bit about what the negotiables are. It could be in your setting, and some of them may or may not. But this is just somewhat of a list here, and I'll let him go through these and talk a little bit more about it as they pertain to many of your schools.
Thanks, Jerry. There are a lot of these in our environment that are negotiated through our union contract. The bargaining, it goes on, seems like for a year before an agreement is reached. And so the bargaining team generally digs into this stuff and gets what they think is the best deal for faculty and classified or whatever other employees are in the bargaining team. So salary and benefits, it's a given. We all have our salary schedules. Benefits are definitely negotiated through the negotiating team. Our responsibilities can vary. We have things that we do that are a benefit to the college that can get us some release time. That's definitely a negotiable item because somebody has to ask us, and then we have to decide whether that's what we want to do or not. And we have that back and forth. Committee assignments, definitely a negotiable. I will say, and I don't know if I'm gloating or not, but because of the nature of my assignment, I haven't been on a committee for quite a while at the school. Don't tell anybody that because I'm sure some of my colleagues would not like that very much. But professional development funds, another negotiated item through our contract. Summer assignments, absolutely, that's a negotiated negotiated requirement, and that gets back into our teaching responsibilities. Sabbaticals, yep, we can negotiate those. The amount of time we get for a sabbatical, I think, is non-negotiable, but whether we get one or not is part of that sabbatical negotiation. The rest of them, I think, are really are mostly things that we can negotiate. The office space, for instance, that in our division is done on a seniority process, and so we really don't have a lot of opportunity to bid for the best office with the greatest view. The rest of these things are, in some instances, really applicable. Some are not, though, and you know, if you have a new job on the right-hand side of the ledger, then some of this stuff is really set in stone. And so there you go.
Great. So, but I think it's really important whether this list is, which parts of these lists are appropriate for you. At least try to think of some of the ones, and you might even add to this list, that are negotiable and that are really important to you. This, again, it's not a game. What thing is really important to you? Set some priorities about what is important when you think about what your negotiables are. So, and think about, what do you want to negotiate for now? And it's good to start small. And, you know, when over the years in working with a lot of different technical and folks and scientific folks about this, and that are really uncomfortable, first of all, in communication skills, yet alone in negotiating, I always say to start small. You know, even as small as who's going to take out the trash at home. And I have some great stories of just the simplest. I'll give you an example. So we were working with a group that when we were at a hotel, and we had a small group that we were working with on negotiation. And then we gave them the homework assignment. Then we were just going to give the skills at night. And then the next morning, they were supposed to come or in the afternoon, they were supposed to come back to the next day and have negotiated for something in the evening. So this one woman in the group, she said, I can't do this. There's no way I can do this. You know, she was really shy, and she said, I can't negotiate for something. And so, but I'll come tomorrow morning and listen to what everybody else did. And so the next morning she came in and she was just bouncing it. She was so excited. She was so excited. So we were all really curious. So we said, okay, what's up? What did you do? She said, well, I went back to my hotel room and I laid down on my pillow and it was too hard. So I picked that pillow up and I went to the front desk and I said, I really need to have a softer pillow. And they gave it to me. I had a good night's sleep. So even something as simple as a pillow to her then, really helped her build her confidence. So the small things can help you build your confidence.
Jerry, I thought you were going to say she got the presidential suite. Bouncing off the walls.
Oh, she was really happy. She was really happy. Okay, and then, but you also need to think about who you're going to negotiate with. And it's good to find out from others, if you're not familiar with that person, find out from others how their interactions with that person have gone. So you might have some hints of how best to approach that person. Okay, so the next step then is to understand what's called BATNA and ZOPA. And this is terms that are commonly used in negotiation. You don't speak them, but you certainly think them. And so the BATNA is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And that is what you think is what you really want. Always ask yourself, what's my BATNA? And consider the different alternatives. Consider the different alternatives, because when you're going into a negotiation, there's going to be give and take, and you want to at least have in your mind beforehand, prepare in advance, what might be given or taken away from you in the process. And keep in mind that the BATNA is dynamic, just as a conversation is dynamic. So you go in with a particular interest, and as you learn the interest, a lot of the issue of negotiation is not just you talking, but you listening to the other person. And as you listen to them, you might change your strategy a little bit, or change your what you want a little bit. Never get rid of it. I mean, they're always going to say there's not enough money to do any of this. And so don't be scared away by that, because you're still in the negotiation. So then just don't drop way that much further. So what you want to do, though, is to at least get some sense, show respect, show the other person that you're interested in understanding, but you then come back to what your objectives are. So in the process of listening, you also want to kind of figure out where their boundaries are with regards to what limits they have. So you want to be questioning them too. And so this is in part how you get out of that no that I referred to, where the person says no and they expect you to walk out of the room. This is the time in which you simply try to understand why they said no. So you can say, oh, it would be really helpful to me. This is a very important issue for me. That's why I have come to you. And so it's really important for me to understand your response a little bit better. So could we talk a little bit more about that? Sometimes they'll say no in an explanation, and you can still try to get more information from them. And so this is really important in building respect as well as in trying to understand where they're coming from. Now, the other thing is don't be afraid to drop the anchor. So this means that don't be afraid to put out on the table what you want. Okay, so for example, if you're going to sell your car, you know that you have to put out, this is how much I would like from that car. And of course, remember, it's always higher than what you will negotiate down to. Hopefully, though, if it's really high and they agree immediately, the negotiation's done and you celebrate and you're so happy. But the point is you drop the anchor at some point, at some level. And that's where the negotiation starts, right? So don't be afraid to drop the anchor. Say what you want, and it might be a little bit higher. And that's why we get into this, the next issue of, oops, got to get my cursor to go forward. That's where we get to the issue of then ZOPA. And so with ZOPA, that's your zone. That's the zone. You come in with, you request something that's a reasonable upper limit. You don't tell them what your acceptable lower limit is. You say, oh, I can sell my car anything from $5,000 to $1,000. Of course, you don't tell them your ZOPA. You have that in mind. But you also understand how low, you won't go any lower than that. So you have an upper bound and you have an lower bound. And you try to understand what their ZOPA is. So your ZOPA is the region that you're negotiating. I think Roger has an example in this area too.
Yeah, you know, and thanks, Jerry. This example is really significant to my career. I started at the college in '89 as a contract employee, not a contracted faculty, but a contract employee delivering workshops for a program. And in 1992, I accepted the position as a full-time employee managing this program that I run now. And I accepted funding from for those of you outside of the area, the BPA, which is the Bonneville Power Administration. They provide wholesale electricity to our region, to our public utilities. Well, they came to the college and said, look, we know you had a program there in the early 80s. Would you mind restarting it? And so they gave us $250,000 a year for 3 years, and the college hired me to run the program. So we worked around back and forth on some soft funding and a little bit of general fund. And during that same period of time, Oregon passed a property tax limitation measure that when it came out of the courts, it passed. And when it came out of the courts, really affected all of our public entities, including the community college. And so since we were like the last ones into the general fund to whatever degree that is, we were the first ones out. And so the president told me that I was going to lose my program, got a pink slip. We went through all of the standard program review strategies that the college does. It went in front of the board and we did presentations and just really fought hard to keep us in the general fund. Well, we didn't make it. I received a pink slip, but before I was terminated from the school, I went in and talked to the college president and said, listen, this is a very important program, energy management. I mean, it's helping us with global climate change and everything else that energy affects. And I said, this is going to be an important program for you. And she said, yeah, that's all very interesting. You're out still. Goodbye. And I said, how about this? And this gets to the ZOPA. How about this? I said to her, how would it be if we found our own funding for a very traditional career technical education program? If we found our own funding and supported ourselves? And she said, didn't take much calculation on her part. She said, yeah, no money going out, money coming in, Why, of course you can do that. And I don't remember if she said that immediately right at that time, or she had to think about it a little bit. But if she thought about it and then got back to me, it was in a matter of days. So getting back to the ZOPA, the reasonable upper limit would have been, yeah, come on back in. Here's some general fund money. You're safe for the next however long period of time. The lower end of the ZOPA, the acceptable lower limit for me was just staying on campus to whatever degree I could. So it was kind of saving my job, but also saving a very important program that I thought was valuable to the region, if not the entire country. We were the only program doing this for a period of time, and so we were the model that other programs followed. So it was really an important program to keep around, and I was willing to, for no extra salary, I was still on the salary schedule and getting what I deserved for that period, to go out and find funding. That was my lower acceptable level. Below that is like, you're out, go find other work. So I think that is a pretty good example of a ZOPA.
No, and it's also very good because what Roger did in that case was he listened to what the president was saying. And while he was listening, he was thinking about what his BATNA was and where he was going to go with this. And so that's why getting the other person to talk is really important, because that helped guide him where he was going to go. So you got to be on top of your game to think about this. But this also raises another point. And we'll get to this when it becomes a very difficult situation where you're both getting really stressed out. The other person may be getting a little angry. You're getting more stressed out. And in those circumstances, you can't think clearly. So it's really important to keep the temperature down as much as you can so you can think clearly, because your brain doesn't work when you're overly stressed out. So that's why before Roger went in, he had thought about the kind of options that he had, right, Roger? And that made it easier, that made it less stressful. But going in and thinking, well, I'm just going to go in and ask for this and, whatever happens, happens, I'll live with it. No, don't do that, because you can undermine your ability to be successful.
Absolutely. And I want to say that the outcome was we kept our program. It's still running. I mean, we were able to keep our program for quite a while. We're on soft money still. We have been very successful getting grants and money coming into the program. We now have that professional development certification back under our management. The whole reason for that was to generate income for my program. And so, given time, those strategies that we deployed actually are working and keeping us afloat. I also want to say that the president of the college became a very enthusiastic supporter of sustainability. I mean, enthusiastic. She's retired now and lectures on the topic. So
yeah, that's great.
You had her drink the Kool-Aid.
And a great example. Okay, so, and then we talked about, think about when you're talking to them what their ZOPA might be. Okay, so now I'm going to do a little by the side analysis. We could have given you a test to be able to figure out what kind your negotiating style is, but I'm just going to walk you through it. And you can think about when you've negotiated for something before, even if it was really simple. The optimum place that you want to be when you negotiate is really in this brown. You place it into 4 different categories. And the first one is problem solving. And so when you're negotiating, if you're the kind of person that goes in and you're negotiating with somebody else and you're problem solving together, you're thinking about how you might be able to put this all together, that's really ideal. That's really ideal. And that's where that's a sweet spot you want to be in when you negotiate. So think about that as your goal, that it's a problem solving exercise. And again, sometimes you may have to be the adult in the room in order to make that conversation go in that direction, but you can play that role. Now, if you're in this greenish colored box, then that means that you're the kind of person that when you negotiate, you basically always give in. You want to be liked. You want to be the nice person. And so you go in and say, this is really important to me. This is what I need. And they say, well, I'm sorry, somebody else just came in a few minutes ago and they got all that I had. And so I can't give you that. And you say, oh, okay, well, I can understand that. The other person is probably more needy than I am. And then you do it again. And somebody else gets in front of you, or the money's somewhere else, or they don't have the time to let you do this. And you say, that's okay, I understand the college's responsibilities are much more important than mine are. And if you follow that trend, you're satisfying the needs of others, but how do you feel over time? Most people feel like unhappy and like you're a rug on the floor that people step all over. So, you may think that this is, you're being the nice person, but on the other hand, it really is not healthy, because then you can start to hate your job, and you don't feel good about yourself, lose your confidence. It's not good. So once in a while, you have to give in, okay? But not every time. Think about when it's important for you to keep going, and then other times when you give in, but don't do it all the time. Now, the other one is even simpler on you, and that's just never ask. Never ask for anything. You don't engage, you just avoid, and that's the stressful part of what we said in negotiation. And then you don't get anything that you need, and that's not healthy either, particularly when there are things that are important to you, important in your career development, important to your students, important to what your organization. So you should be willing to push yourself to stay out of that box in terms of avoidance. Now, the fourth one, that red one, is the one that this is where you go in and you say, I need it now, I'm not going to take anything less. So for many of us, that doesn't always work. In fact, doesn't work very often. But there are people who can be very aggressive and force and compete in the negotiation. But they also get a reputation for not being a team player too. And so, but once in a while, if it's so important to you that you have to do the force and compete, then you do it. But make that be the exception, because you burn bridges when you do that. So think about how you can get into a situation where you're comfortable with asking for things, what you need, problem solve, collaborate, but realize that there's other options, but these other options, you use it at your own expense if you're not too careful. Okay, so now, understand the importance of data. And many of you understand the importance of data in the work that you do, but let's talk about the importance of data in a negotiation. Facts are your friends, nothing personal, strictly business. And let me just say that we want to take it out of the personal realm. Oh, it's so important to me. It's so important to me, and that it gets inside you and it just kind of tears you up. And that when a negotiation doesn't go in your direction, then it can be really painful. But I'm going to turn it over to Roger to give an example of how important the data can be in a negotiation that he's done.
Yeah, this will go back to the building operator certification that was taken away from me a couple of years ago, and I initially, when that happened, I initially went to my immediate supervisor. At that time was a vice president. I said, "Look, this is my program. You can't do that." And he said, "Well, yeah, we can to begin with, and second of all, there you go. That's enough." And I had gone back through a division chair. I had been moved from under a vice president to a division, science division. And I went through the division chair and started that sort of a, chain of command process. And I'll tell you that our entire senior management has changed within the last 2 years, completely changed. And so a lot of the people that I was dealing with had no idea, one, who we are, the energy management program, and the value of our program to the college, but had no idea that we had been on soft money that we had found ourselves. And so that was an issue to begin with. So in the negotiation process, I got permission from my division chair to talk above him. So I went to associate vice president, who was new, and explained the case to him. And he said, well, the decision's been made to end the program. It was supposed to end in June, this past June. And I said, well, you can't really do that because and he said, oh, no, we can. So I said, so what is the problem? Why is it that we can't have this program in a credit side of the house? And he said, well, it's not that at all. The matter is that it's in the red, pretty significantly in the red. And so the data part of this is I created a spreadsheet that showed that if it came back to us, we would increase the amount of training. I would reduce salaries for the instructors. These aren't negotiated salaries for instructors. These are contract instructors. I thought they were getting paid too much to begin with. And I said, look, to save this program, we all are going to have to take a little bit of reduction for our daily training cost. I showed that to him in a worksheet. That was my data. And we were in the black again. And so he said, you can do this? And I said, yeah, we can. We've been doing it for quite a while, and until it got taken away. And it was at that point where he said, let me have a look at this, and we'll run it up and see where we can go with this. And they bought it. I don't think had I been without that spreadsheet to prove to him that we could actually make money on this, and FTE, which is significant for the college, that they would have given me the time of day. So the data really proved valuable in this case.
Thanks, Roger. Now, in many cases, figuring out how you're going to get the data for your negotiation can be a little tricky because some things don't require a spreadsheet or a budget, but you can do whatever you can to get the data. Being able to understand, for example, what the norm is for the campus, or you have some data associated with that, what any kind of data you can get about what those norms are. Now, what you want to avoid is saying, well, Jane got this, and that being your data point and why you should get it now. So we're going to avoid that. So as much data that you can get that's a little larger than one or two people is really important to do. But the data, again, getting the data makes it a lot less personal. Okay, so then now you've got the data, you figured out your style, you got your BET and your ZOPA, and now we're going to just spend a few minutes talking about increasing your listening skills. Because as you've heard from Roger and myself too, these listening skills listening is really important, and oftentimes it's undervalued in a negotiation. So let's just talk about some simple things with regards to this active listening. And this goes again to someone says no, or you want to understand where they're coming from. So with reflective listening, it also builds respect. With reflective listening, they come back and they've said something and you say, oh, let me see if I understand what you're saying. It sounds to me as if the budget issues right now are really something that's happened just in the last few months. And what you're trying to do is figure out what goes on now from here on out, or whatever it is. So reflect back to see if you can understand what they're saying. Because sometimes someone will respond to you and they think they're clear, but actually they're not. And so in that case, being able to reflect back, let me see if I understand what you're saying. It's also important in a negotiation when you think you've come up to an agreement, and then you say, let me see if I can paraphrase what we've just concluded. So I don't know if you've ever been in a situation, I certainly have, where you think you've got an agreement and then you leave and then you realize, wait a minute, we were not on the same page in this. So it's really important to listen and then be able to reflect back. Now, in this, your body language is really important. Making eye contact, that's a little easier to do now that we're doing virtually, and nodding your head. And now that now the first few months in this virtual thing, maybe it was a little weird to do this, but I think more people are getting comfortable and even doing a negotiation virtual. In many respects, it's better than doing it all over email. Email can be used to kind of finalize things, but it's really, we always urge you to do a negotiation in person, and in that case, then be engaged in what they're saying. And examples are, it sounds like what you're saying, seems you're most concerned about. Let's see if I understand. Do I have this right? Again, showing that you're interested in what they're saying and want to hear more. So, and then what do you think about, in what way, tell me about. All of these kind of words, again, are showing that you're really interested in them and you respect their opinion, But again, while you're doing this, so I call this data taking. So while they're talking, you're taking data. You're taking data on what they said, what are their constraints, what are their interests, what are the things that are most important to them, so you can think about how you're going to craft that negotiation. So you gotta be on point. Okay, so now sometimes these negotiations can even get more difficult, and so that's why we have this last section on be ready for some theater. Roger, have you ever been in a negotiation where it got a little testy?
Actually, as you said at the beginning, Jerry, we are negotiating all the time. And when we were going through this initially to kind of sync up on this presentation, I had just finished a negotiation with my mechanic. This happens constantly in our lives. As I said earlier, spouse, a kid, a mechanic. And I had some car repair done. It was not cheap car repair. And so when I got the car back, it wasn't running the way it should have been. And I went back to the guy and said, nah, this is not happening. And so he fixed it. And then I got it back and still wasn't fixed. And I took it back to him. And he said, oh, it's going to cost you this much more to have this repair done. And I went, wait a minute. I don't think that's going to happen that way. So let's talk about it. And I was able to negotiate him from an extra $1,000. I don't mean to be specific about my car repair, but an extra $1,000 to a $500 price tag. And I thought, well, these are things that I'm doing with Jerry. This works.
So I got a little testy. Not
getting freaked out or, just saying, look, here are the facts. I mean, providing the data. I've already paid this much and I was supposed to have a car that worked and I didn't. And now you're going to throw something else on? Please. And so fortunately, the guy was willing to do it. He could have said, absolutely not. This is what it costs. And there you go.
But the point is you were patient and you're professional in this. And so that's really important. But also what you did too. So there are different tactics that you can use. And what Roger was explaining to him was what the background behind this was and what his limits were. So think about a situation where you can't, it's not easy to come to an agreement. And so you launch some trial balloons and study what they say. So if I am not able to get travel expenses for this particular meeting this year, what about another one next year? What about next year's HI-TEC meeting? Let's talk about that as a possibility and see what their response is. Study their response. And then sum up agreements and disagreements. I'm going to go to being able to go to the HI-TEC meeting if we were all traveling again. And so it seems to me that you believe that going to a HI-TEC meeting is really important. We're able to meet program officers, we're able to network with others who do agree that it's important. So you get an agreement and then you say, but it seems what we're worrying about is the issue of finances for this. But you do agree that it's important. So get the yes in this negotiation. And then you can also expand the pie. I'm going to work together to get the resources, like Roger talked about. In that case, he said, look, I'll go out and raise this money and put us back in the black. And so and not only was he expanding the pie with resources, but he was also saying, I'll work at this, and it's not going to be at your expense. It's going to be, I'm doing something extra to do this.
Jerry, if I could interrupt for a second, the benefit to the college was it increased our FTE, whether it was my degree program or my professional development. It all fills their bucket. And if I'm doing the work for it, sure, why not?
Yeah, it's great. And then, and we also oftentimes say, if you're going to negotiate for something, it might be wise to go in for a couple of things, but you know your high priority one, and that way, hopefully one person wins one and one person wins the other. So going in with one that's a particularly high priority can be good. Okay, so now the temperature is getting a little higher in that room, maybe a little more stressful in the room, so let's talk a little bit about some strategies to use for that. So let's say, for example, that the person comes back to you very strongly with a response that you think maybe with a little too vocal, but again, we're trying to keep the temperature down. And so be quiet, and then come back with a response that is calm and say, let me see if I understand what you're saying. And so, but the silence can be good, because while you're silent, they don't know what you're thinking. And you're getting yourself ideas of what you're going to say when you come back, to calm yourself down. Another is to go to a higher authority. And this does not mean get down on your knees and pray. This is more about, as Roger did in his case, this is actually better for the college if I have this program, because look, you can get FTEs from this. You can, this is more than about what I want. This is better for everybody. if we're able to do this, if I'm able to go to this particular meeting, I will show all the great things that are happening on our campus. And I may be even able to meet with some funding people and learn a little bit more about how our college could get more money for these particular activities. So it's more than just about me, it's about others too. Now let's go to the situation where it's getting uncomfortable. And in fact, you're getting stressed out. And as one possibility, you're getting stressed out now. What we do not do in a negotiation, we try to avoid, is screaming and crying. And there are probably other options too. But you do not want to get emotional. And so, for example, when I get really angry, I start to cry. I mean, I just get really mad. I don't know what makes it squirt out of my eyes. But I know when I get to that situation, I got to clear the room. I got to get out. So I just, oh my gosh, I've got to get out of here. Oh, this is so important, but I need to have something else going on. Let's talk about meeting in maybe another week or a couple of days. This is important, so let's do it. I'll be in touch with you to schedule another time. And we're in the middle of this, and I'll email you about it. Something, just clear out. The other thing is that in a negotiation, they may offer an option that you didn't think about. And it may be a good option or maybe a bad option, but you need to go back to your office and Google what it is and figure out what it is and decide whether that's amenable. So you say, I very respect your alternative. I hadn't really thought about that one. So let me think about that and I'll get back to you and let's talk. Tuesday, let's set a time now so we can come back and talk. So being able to come back and talk can also give you time to think about the negotiation. Now, this I could put a big star next to, it's putting in writing. And it's so critically important to put things in writing when you have finished the negotiation or when you're in the middle of, so you've stopped the meeting, you've agreed on parts of it, but you still have other things to agree on. And so you say, or whether it's at the end or the middle, you say, I'm going to go back to my office. Thanks very much. I'm going to go back to my office. I'm going to write you an email that summarizes all of this. If I don't hear from you by Friday, I'm going to assume it's okay. Did you hear that? If I don't hear from you by whatever, I'm going to assume it's okay, so that they don't pocket email it, veto email, okay? And then you go back and you write down precisely what you think transpired, and you hope that you get a response back from them and you can remind them too. Now, so it's important to put that in writing. Now, in Roger's case, Roger, you can talk a little bit more about this too, because your negotiation then ended up, as you told me, your negotiation then ended up kind of going in the email direction after you had started the first step.
Right, yeah. When I was negotiating with the associate vice president, we sat there face to face in his office. I handed him my spreadsheet. He read through it very briefly and saw no red in there. And he said, yeah, I'll send it up. And so I was able to go back to my office and send him a confirmation email saying, geez, sir, this is what we agreed upon. Do you agree with this? And while it took a few reminders for him to get back to me, it was all documented. And yes, in fact, he agreed to it. So it was always very easy just to forward an existing email or reply to an existing email. And of course, I keep them all in my vice president's folder, just so I know where to get them. So.
Well, and also when you change administrations so much, as is so common in community colleges, there's you're the one that oftentimes is holding the paper trail or the electronic trail. So it's really important that you're able to do that. And then you also, this is our coach motto, to be relentlessly pleasant. We are relentless and we are also pleasant. Okay, so stress the relentless part, but also pleasant is businesslike. It's really being professional.
Our mantra here, Jerry, is kill them with kindness. And every time somebody comes in, be it a student or an administrator or something, and they have a little fire burning for one reason or another, I always reinforce the fact to my staff that we need to kill them with as much kindness without being ooky that we can possibly give them. It just calms everything down. Being pleasant calms everything down.
That's great. Okay, so a few more words about temperature getting up there, some learning goals with regards to having a difficult negotiation. Really recognize when the language or the behavior is inappropriate. If someone is pounding on the table, if someone is yelling at you, that is inappropriate. And you have to decide how you're going to handle that. You can handle it directly by saying that I I would feel a lot more comfortable if you spoke in tones that were quieter, or if you were not pounding on the table, because I don't think that's particularly productive. I want to be able to work with you, so let's figure out how to do that. Or if you need to report it because something has crossed the line, then know where you go to report it, and each institution is different. And do develop the skills that reduce the heat rather than flame the fire, and that is, as we've talked about, the silence, being relentlessly pleasant, killing with kindness. But the point is that for me, being able to open my hands up, or makes me calm down, gives more a calm view. When you start to do things like this, that's you can telegraph your body, how you feel with your body language. So be careful with that. But also, when you tighten up, you actually produce cortisol in your body, which is actually more stress. And so what you don't want to do is to, be sitting there crossing your leg while your back goes out, as well as doing this, unless you want to use that for body language. And so this goes along with learn techniques to maintain everybody's different, to maintain your composure. And then also learn how to keep the dialogue focused on resolving the issue. This is really important. There used to be a book, I think it's still out there, it's called The Dance with Anger. And it's largely focused on families. But what it is if you've ever negotiated with someone and you say, for example, I really need to have this time off because I have a family issue coming up and I really need to have these next few days up. And the other person comes back and says, how dare you ask for that time off? You're just not working hard at all. I don't believe that you're doing anything. So what makes you think you get that kind of time off? Well, you could then respond with, what do you mean I'm not taking, you're the one that's never around. So, right, this is the dance with anger. You want to avoid that. So when that kind of stuff happens, you simply repeat what your request is, and you keep repeating what your request is until they realize they're not getting anywhere and hooking you to dance with anger. It takes some skill to do that, but on the other hand, it's important because that's a tactic. That's a strategy that they're using on you, and you need to recognize it's a strategy and you need to counter strategy. And the last is know when a mediator is necessary. So sometimes we'll get in a negotiation, it's clear you need a third body. And you both agree who that mediator could be, because it's just not going anywhere, and it's important to both of you. And that's what you say, this is really important to both of us, but I don't think we're getting anywhere with this. So I think we need to bring someone in that you respect, that I respect, to help us through this. Because this is, and you realize this is really important to me. It doesn't happen every time, but it's something that you really feel very strongly about. Okay, so some final ones. Take a deep breath. Roger, how'd it go for you?
Well, I tell you, I had to do that in 2 of the 3 instances that I've identified. I don't normally go in and speak to the president of the college, and I was in literally negotiating for my livelihood, and it was a tough situation. So breathing deeply was part of my strategy, and then this car negotiation thing, I think it just drove me crazy. And so having to keep my composure and reinforcing the fact that I felt like I was not getting a fair deal required some deep breathing. And yeah, it's very important to do.
You just don't want to do too much of it and hyperventilate. So
you want to fall over, do you?
And try to understand both sides of you. Go back to trying to understand their point of view, and also acknowledge that it's a tough time for everybody right now, and we're all in this together. Now, go to the balcony means if somebody's getting really upset with you and they're just throwing junk at you, they're just oh, and this, if you listen to that, all they're doing is venting. And if you listen to that, right, you just get really angry, like Roger was talking about, you get really, really angry. Instead, this go to the balcony is basically pretend that you're up looking at this scene and there's this crazy guy that's screaming at you. And isn't that completely insane? Don't listen to what the other person is screaming. Just think, I'm on the balcony and I'm just looking at how crazy this situation is. And then when they get done, then you can come back to, with your calm, composed voice, and come back and talk again. So think about how you can try to remove yourself while they throw all this, the person throws all the junk. And beyond that, explore their interests. It goes with acknowledging the reality. And composure is important. Agree with them when you can. reframe and repackage, different ways that you can say things that you've got going. Now, all of these slides, if you email us, we're happy to provide these slides for you so that you don't, some of you may have been taking notes crazily, and now I'm telling you at the end, so I apologize for that. Stop using words that undercut your power. I know it may be unfair, but I like being a team player, but I've had a very productive year, but get rid of the buts. I know that it may seem unfair, and it's still very important to me. Rather than but, it's still very important to me. So the and is a much stronger word. Use your ands, not your buts. You'll be amazed how much you use that in your everyday language. Use powerful words. I'm confident, I know, I believe, I will do, I'm certain. But I think, I hope, I feel. Now, sometimes these softer words have to be used in situations, particularly personal situations, but try to stick with the stronger ones. And don't do the stuff like, I may be wrong on this. It's just my opinion. It's probably a stupid question. You probably know more than I do about this. So let's stay away from that stuff too, unless you need to back off for a little bit and pull things back again. But don't use it as a negotiating strategy. Okay, so with that, we're going to just kind of finish up with the fact that we've talked about different negotiables for you. What is and isn't a negotiation situation. You can see this now. You know what BATNA and ZOPA are, and you have some examples from Roger about different ways of different things to negotiate and how you, the style that you use in figuring out the BATNA and ZOPA, and figuring out your style. And data, it's your friend. Nothing personal, strictly business. Nothing personal, strictly business. Use good listening skills and learn the benefits of collaborative negotiations. And with that, it's a wrap up. So Roger, what would you like to say as we finish up?
You know, I think this applies to every walk of life. I think that if we can apply some of the skill set, then we'll be a little bit more happy with how we move through this world. And I think people that we interact with will be happier with us. Not that that's our ultimate goal, but it doesn't hurt. So thank you, Jerry, very much for running through these. I think we can all take a bit of something from this.
Great, and thank you, Roger. It's great to have you as a team member with me.
All my pleasure. I appreciate the invitation.
And be relentlessly pleasant. It's good for everyone. Thank you very much. And we hope that the rest of the meeting goes well. Please email us if you want, coach.uoregon@uoregon.edu. It's on the, it's probably on the program too, but please let us know and we'll, or Jerry Richmond at the University of Oregon and Roger at Lane Community College. And we'd be happy to provide these again. Best wishes to you, particularly in these difficult times, and we hope to see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.